Thank you for watching. I watched the Kent Hovind debate, and now I will comment on it. This was a debate between somebody, his real name was Steve, they called him Steve more than once in the debate. Destiny is his, I guess, YouTube name or Twitter name or something like that. Kent went first. He gave a mini autobiography of himself, comparison of how big the difference is between 6,000 and billions of years. He cited evidence for a young Earth as the symbiotic relationships. The fact there are plants, well, all plants need animals to breathe out carbon dioxide. All animals need plants to turn that carbon dioxide into pure O2, pure oxygen, but not O3, O2. And so that is proof that things could not have happened slowly. If everything happened one day at a time, one day without animals breathing back for the plants isn't a problem. There are other symbiotic relationships where there's one certain insect or bird that can pollinate the one flower. Or termites have a parasite inside of them which actually digests the wood that they eat. It's its own animal, its own DNA. Kent Hovind thanked Steve for doing the debate with him. Kent Hovind claims there are thousands of times he has offered to debate people and they did not accept the offer of a debate. And I believe him. Maybe some people don't want to debate Kent Hovind because they believe it would give credibility to young Earth creationism. Richard Dawkins is one person who I've heard, not in person, I've never met the man in person, but saw a video of him saying he will never debate a young Earth creationist because it gives too much credibility to that viewpoint. See, Kent said he's got biblical and scientific evidences for the Earth to be young and not the billions of years old that the religion of evolutionism says it is. Kent Hovind said that if you say that you kiss a frog, it turns into a prince, that's a fairy tale. If you give it millions of years and billions of years, it's still a fairy tale. Time does not create anything. And he pointed out that when you dig bones up in the dirt, they don't have a date stamped on them. Somebody who digs a bone up from the ground and says a name of a time period or the number of a year is doing some interpreting and not reading some kind of label on the bone. Destiny made a very quick opening statement. He claimed atheism is not a religion, which is a stupid thing to say or a dishonest thing to say. I need to know him better to know whether he was being stupid or dishonest, but religion is a belief system. It's how somebody looks at things. And atheism definitely is a belief system about how things are here, why they're here, what we should do. Yeah, it was less than 2 minutes, his first thing. Even though he had 8 minutes, he could have spent on it because he wanted to get to the back and forth part of the debate. Kent Hovind pointed out atheism is a religion, and oh yeah, all you need is one piece of evidence to prove a young Earth, to prove it, to outweigh all the other evidence. And he's right. If there's one good piece of solid evidence for a young Earth, then it outweighs all the other stuff. He made an analogy between a criminal proceeding. If there's one piece of good evidence that somebody did not do a crime, that exonerates them. We don't lock people up when there's evidence, one piece of evidence. There could be other evidences that they might have done it, but once it's proven, they were in Chicago when the murder happened, then you you can't convict him. He said we don't see stars forming. We see novas and supernovas. He said only like 3 or 4 supernovas have been seen. Boyle's gas laws are contradictory to the idea of a star forming. Boyle's gas law just says that gases are going to repel each other and not naturally come together. Jupiter is still cooling. If it were billions of years old, it should have cooled off by now, was Kent's point. Jupiter's moon, Ganymede, is still magnetic. If it were billions of years old, it should have lost its magnetism. Destiny said he didn't hear any evidence. Gave the definition of agnostic, and said that was the definition of atheism. An agnostic is somebody who does not know. They're neutral or claim they don't know. So an agnostic is saying he doesn't know if there's a God. An atheist is by definition saying meaning opposite, not theist, believes there's a God or gods. Not believe there's gods. He gave an analogy of the age of skin. Because our skin replenishes itself, you wouldn't be able to take a skin cell and know that it's a week old and say, well, that person's a week old. That's a bad analogy, though, because when you look at a rock, it's not recycled or grown the way skin cells are grown. He claims we can see stars forming in the Orion Nebula, but then he admitted we never watch the entire star forming. It takes too long. So let's see. Yeah, he said something that was a very weak refutation, unsuccessful refutation of the explaining how Jupiter is cooling and billions of years old. Claims that anciently the moon had a different rate of movement, and that's why it can be billions of years old and moving away right now. And he claimed the way they know that is by looking at how the moon affected the coast thousands and millions of years ago. You don't know how the moon affected the coast that long ago. That's some iffy science. Aaron Raw accused Kent Hovind in their debate of using the what's the name of the fallacy of incredulity. In other words, you didn't prove it because I don't believe it. That's what Destiny did here. Kent didn't do that when he was accused of doing that. Aaron Raw didn't prove anything. But Kent had some good proof, and Destiny gave us an example of the argument from incredulity, or failure to believe because of incredulity. Alright, they added 5 minutes to the dialogue because of Destiny's short introduction. Kent Hovind pointed out, let's see. Kent Hovind asked if the Bible could count as one piece of evidence, and Destiny said no. Kent Hovind pointed out that the skin analogy is not accurate, and Kent Hovind was using evidence. It's not just the rocks on the Earth. The cooling and magnetism of Jupiter and Jupiter's moons and the moon are not rocks on the Earth and could not be falsified or refuted by saying, but that just, the Earth tectonic magma cycle recycles rocks, and that's why. Kent Hovind pointed out the inverse square law, which is when you get closer to something, you square the amount of force of gravity, or when you get further away, you reverse square to figure out how much gravity there is. That works about light, that works about radiation. But the inverse square law means when the moon gets closer to the Earth, at some point the gravity is going to be increased dramatically. The gravitational pull increased dramatically because it's going to increase at an exponential rate as it gets closer, as you think back on the past when it was closer. Kent Hovind found studies where scientists took the time to look at the physics, to calculate the speed of the moons moving away from the Earth, and they came to the conclusion that 1 billion years ago, the moon would have collapsed into the Earth. They would have been touching, or been so close that the strength of gravity would have pulled them together to collide. And okay. And then Kent Hovind asked the question about whether Destiny's belief about the past could still work if he only has 1 billion years and not the 4.5 billion years that is the most current spoken of date of the age of the planets by people of that belief. He said he didn't know how to respond to the inverse square law. Evidence young or only... Oh, shoot. Let's see. Or only... Yeah. I watched this yesterday and my notes were limited in size, so... Yeah, that Destiny claimed that Kent didn't have good evidence. Kent Hovind claimed that the Earth and the Moon would have snapped together like magnets. If you hold two magnets, they will. You can hold them far enough apart where they aren't attracted at all, and the closer you get them, the stronger the magnetic attraction. And at some point, they're going to have such a strong attraction, they will snap together, unless we're talking about really weak magnets. But that's what would have happened to the Moon and the Earth in the past if things were the 4 billion years that Destiny believes. Destiny claimed it's not that simple. There was a lot of different factors, and the Moon was moving. And that he used that argument, the Earth was moving, and the Moon was moving around the Earth, and somehow that negates the inverse square law. I don't see how that negates the inverse square law. They're still going to have gravity pulling them together. Kent Hovind pointed out that the spinning of the Earth is one evidence of a young Earth because we can calculate that the Earth is slowing down its speed. If it's billions of years old, it was spinning a lot faster in the past. And we can see what that would do to something because Jupiter is spinning extremely fast right now. And Jupiter has 300 mile per hour winds. You could not have life with 300 mile per hour winds blowing things around. It would destroy anything that was starting. And Destiny's, didn't understand how that could be or something. He said there'd be a 14-hour day if you take these calculations into account about calculate backwards at the current rate of loss of spin of the Earth. And he doesn't see how that would be a problem. Kent Hovind pointed out plants need the day and the night, and a 14-hour day would dramatically change how much sun and day and night the plants were getting and would get in the way of them working. Kent Hovind made a coin analogy. If you find a sunken ship and you find a coin in there, you can know from that coin it did not sink before a certain date because the coins will let you know, it could not have sunk before a coin was started to be minted. And one of just like one coin that is from a certain year would prove that the ship sunk after that year, because you couldn't sink a ship before the coins were made. One evidence of a young Earth would prove his point, or disprove the old Earth theory, or old Earth hypothesis is a better word. Destiny claimed Kent didn't present an age. Let's see. Kent Hovind says astronomy says. Oh yeah. Kent Hovind said his evidence was that Destiny's believed age of things is proven wrong by the 1 billion year. The moon can't be more than a billion years old. And that's not the Bible. One accusation that was made against Kent Hovind was that he was just using the Bible as his evidence and no other evidence. Destiny gave us an example of argument from incredulity. He refuses to believe the scientists that Kent Hovind quoted. Scientists don't say it's 1 billion years old. Kent Hovind pointed out that the reason that the evolutionists talk about the old Earth is they need time to make what he calls a crazy belief seem maybe plausible. You know, we don't see big changes happening right away. They need a long time so they can say, no, but give it enough time. Give it billions of years and it'll happen. And Ken pointed out that just quoting a scientist because a scientist says something isn't proof of anything. He cited examples of religions that Kent believes are wrong, that the believers of those religions say things, but just somebody saying something isn't proof. Kent specifically cited Islam believing Muhammad was a prophet. Kent does not believe them, and so them saying it is not proof. Catholics believe the Pope is important. Kent disagrees. Them saying it is not proof. Reject those. Let's see, minute. Need 1 billion magnetic field to find. Yeah, Kent said that Destiny needs to explain how things could happen in less than 1 billion years for his, for his theory. He rejects God. Magnetic field decline. The magnetic field of the Earth is declining. That's one fact they weren't disputing. Kent Hovind claims that if the Earth were billions of years old, the magnetic field would be too strong and it would destroy any life, and life could never have started. Destiny claimed we can be certain about how old things are because scientists study rocks. They use the uranium to lead dating method. And Kent cited claimed that doesn't disprove the moon leaving, and that's a stronger evidence. Kent asked if the moon is leaving, and Destiny said yes. Kent said that gives a time limit that Destiny doesn't want, and Kent pointed out that all of the radiometric dating methods have built-in assumptions about the rates being constant, built-in assumptions about the purity of the lead, the uranium, the rubidium, the strontium at the beginning of the process of the rocks existing. Destiny claimed that we can be certain that about the dating techniques, uranium to lead, and the other radiometric techniques. He says they're consistent. Kent Hovind made a stadium analogy. If we're at a stadium and we see 5 people leaving an hour, can we be certain about how many people there were at some time in the past? And of course, you wouldn't, because you would not know if they always left at that rate. You would not know if the stadium started out full or overfilled or not full. Destiny claimed we know about the moon because they know about how it affected the coastlines thousands and millions of years ago. Destiny claimed that dating assumptions, the dating techniques, don't rely on untestable or uncertain assumptions. And then it was Destiny's turn to start off a dialogue. About halfway through the interaction or the dialogue section of the debate, Kent started off, then they switched, which is fair, give Destiny, the other debater, a chance to start things off. Destiny asked Kent where's his evidence for the Earth being 6,000 years old. He likes peer-reviewed things. He brought that up. He pointed out that Kent's moon evidence still leaves a possibility of hundreds of millions of years of age, which is still a lot older than the 6,000. Kent Hovind said the oldest records we have are only thousands of years old. I think he said it was 3,800 years ago is the first ever recorded capital punishment. And Destiny claimed that we have cave paintings that are 40,000 years old, and that disproves that. Kent Hovind asked, how would you know that they're 40,000 years old? Destiny claimed carbon dating and the geologic column. Kent Hovind made an offer to just test whether carbon dating is really that accurate by sending coal from the same coal bed to 5 different laboratories. You should get the exact same result if carbon-14 dating is a precise science and precisely accurate. Nobody in this debate made a commitment to do that. And Destiny claimed that they know not just because of carbon dating. Kent Hovind pointed out that the potassium dating, one dating method is potassium to argon, or we measure how much argon comes out of potassium when it disintegrates. But scientists have increased the decay rate of potassium with heat and pressure. If scientists can increase or decrease the decay rate of something, then you don't know you have a constant decay rate out in nature, because what if there's a place with more of something in the wild, more pressure, less pressure? Destiny really likes carbon-14. He says we can be certain about it. Kent Hovind pointed out that the beginning amount of carbon-14 is assumed. That's true. What if in the past the Earth had less carbon-14 when it was created? What if before the flood there was a different atmosphere that had less carbon-14? That will skew your results of a carbon-14 test. Destiny asked, why would that matter? Kent talked about how he believes before the flood of Noah there was water above the firmament. Ice crystal canopy, he calls it sometimes. And that would block some of the radiation, and that would affect how much carbon-14 there is, because carbon-14 is created by nitrogen in the air being hit by radiation from the sun and turned into the radioactive form of carbon. Destiny claimed that we can measure things, we can be certain about when there were things that affected the carbon-14 or the atmosphere levels in the past. Ken pointed out that anytime you send a sample to a laboratory, they have you fill out a questionnaire and they ask where the thing you were sending to them was found. And that is not needed if you're actually just testing what the radioactive element is. Whether you're talking about carbon-14 or uranium to lead or the one radioactive form of lead to the less radioactive form of lead. Kent's point is a lab should not need to ask you any questions about where they found something if you're going to just use the radiometric dating technique. But they ask because they are not actually using that technique and they're first deciding what date they want to get. Destiny claimed that they need to search for contamination. Lose-lose, search for scientists will know when you tell them where you found a rock or a piece of organic material, they'll know if it was contaminated. At one point, let's see, maybe that was in the... Okay, then they made their closing statements. Kent pointed out the Bible says 6,000 years. And we can know for certain that the earth has a designer, a creator. He gave the example of finding an arrowhead in the ground. A rock chipped off in the shape of an arrowhead is not going to naturally happen. Although that's more plausible than the complete machines. The more Kent pointed out the complexity of cells, and the more complex something is, complex things don't come together. There's no reason to believe that. There's no evidence of it. It's never been witnessed. Destiny claimed he had found a paper from 1994 that refuted what Kent said about the moon, but I didn't find it convincing. He claims complexity is not evidence of design. Wow, that's ridiculous. Of course complexity is evidence of design. Show me anything complex just coming together on its own, and I will apologize for saying that that's ridiculous. But it's never been witnessed. The best we've got are crystals forming. But that's not a complex thing with moving parts that interchange. That's just, once you get the certain chemicals together, they crystallize. And the crystal is the same chemicals, the same molecules, the same elements coming together. It's not a living thing. It's not complex. He claimed we see animals creating animals and people creating people, but we've never seen God create people. No, we see animals using parts that are already built into them to make more animals. But God did not make people that way. And anytime we've seen something creating something else, it was created that way. There had to be something that got it started. He claimed that religions have taught some crazy things in the past. And science taught crazy things in the past, but science is changing. And science changes, but religion doesn't change. They got to the question and answer section. Kent was asked about his PhD thesis and where to find it. Kent objected to the question because it was off the topic. And the moderator said they could skip that question. He offered to refund the super chatter. And they skipped that question. Super chat, of course, on YouTube is when somebody makes a donation to a YouTube channel while they're in the middle of a presentation. So if you're going to give money to the channel, they're going to prioritize you, this one channel at least. They'll prioritize your question. Prioritize you in the way of getting your question asked, as opposed to somebody who asks the question without making a donation to the channel. One question was, what does the second law of thermodynamics apply to Yahweh? And Kent said he doesn't know who or what Yahweh is. I agree. It doesn't make sense to transliterate the Hebrew name of God when we have a perfectly good word in English language that means God, and that's God. But Kent said no, that thought doesn't apply to God. He doesn't fully understand how. He believes. See, Kent was being honest there about what the difference was between his personal and his religious belief and scientific facts. And he believes that the second law of thermodynamics does not apply to God. And I agree with Kent on that. Next question was, name an astronomer who says the Earth is 1 billion years ago would have crashed into the Earth. And he named them Jihad Tuma and Jack Wisdom. Destiny. Let's see. So somebody about 2 astronomers had an explanation. I guess, Destiny claims he's found astronomers that can explain how the moon is billions of years old, multiple billions of years old, despite the evidence that Kent had presented. Question asked about where was the moon formed. Kent answered it. If the moon got 30 or 40 miles closer to Earth, that wouldn't be a problem. So the moon fits perfectly into the young Earth creation model. God creates the Earth, God creates the moon. It starts out where God created it, around the Earth, but not so close that it causes problems. And 6,000 years later, it's a little further away, but, not a problem. And he gave an analogy about car tires. You can measure, if you can know how much rubber is on a car tire, and you could tell how many miles a car had been driven or how old the car is by the car tire age, because those things that can be measured. Things that somebody thinks happened before we can record it require faith. And Destiny repeated his claim that it's more complicated than just citing the inverse square law. Bad argument. Applies attracted. Okay, oh yeah. Destiny accused Kent of being an evolutionist because Kent accepts the non-controversial scientific fact, it's a law, it happens, of microevolution, which really should not be called that. It's too different from macroevolution, but that's a name that we sometimes use for it. And that's a stupid or dishonest thing of Destiny to say. To not acknowledge or understand the difference between micro and macro evolution. So Kent Hovind said dogs and wolves have a common ancestor. Yes. Dogs and mosquitoes, no, they don't have a common ancestor. And Kent Hovind asked for an example of information being gained, because our cells have information that tells our body what we're going to look like. Obviously, malnutrition, diseases, getting chopped up can alter, us from what our DNA would tell us, but it's not going to alter. A human being being malnourished is not going to turn that human being into a fly. It'll just make the human being shorter, maybe have a slightly different stature, but not turn it into an elephant, or an elephant that's malnourished into a person. But that information, there's no information in a single cell animal in their DNA, about how to build legs, lungs, a wide variety of body parts that are needed for a multicellular animal. And so Kent's asking of an example of when it's ever been witnessed. That would make it scientific. Storytelling and science are not the same thing. And Destiny could give no answer to that. He claimed he didn't understand what Kent was asking. Kent had a really reasonable question there. And Destiny, wow. If I were running this debate and created a scoring system for it, Kent would have got a lot of points out of that one, or Destiny would have lost points for not understanding a reasonable point in the question by the other side. Destiny claims that we can believe things that we just believe that have no evidence, and there's belief about things that are based on evidence. And Destiny confused the two things. Just because you can use the word believe to describe you believing that your car is going to be where you parked it when you get out of work, or where you parked it in the morning, where you parked it last night when you get out of your house in the morning. Just because you can be very certain of that does not mean that you can also be certain of things you believe that never were witnessed. And Destiny did some bad conflating of the two kinds of belief. The question was, without any Bible, is there evidence for the Earth being 6,000 years old? The Bible says it, but is there other evidence that puts it at that age exactly? And not just evidence that disproves the billions of years. That question, there were two moderators in this debate. One is Shannon, who was pounding back the wine and not doing a good job of hiding her emotions when she proved that she didn't like Kent's good points. But she was the one that asked that question, and the other moderator, who's always on this channel, Shannon is on it sometimes, but the other moderator is always moderating it, and he vetoed that question because they wanted to have the audience ask the questions. There's a question about Kent decided to answer that anyway, even though he didn't have to. His example was the Sahara Desert is only about 4,000 years old, assuming a steady rate of growth of the desert. And there's now, on the edges of the Sahara Desert, things are dying off because of the drought, which is a desert is a place that by definition has a drought constantly. Small amount of rain is the definition of a desert. But the Sahara Desert is only 4,000 years old. If the Earth is billions of years old, why don't we find a bigger desert? Was Kent's point about that. Human population. Human populations grow. They just naturally do. And we're up to 7-point-something billion people now. If the Earth were billions of years old, that doesn't make sense. But a short Earth with population growth, we can get where we are now. Oil pressure. When people dig for oil in the ground, it shoots up when they get to it sometimes. That's because all the rocks are pushing down on it. If the Earth were billions of years old, the odds are that that oil would have cracked. One of the rocks would have cracked and let all the oil out. But that oil is highly pressurized. There's a lot of pressure there on it, and it's still there. Destiny claimed he didn't know about said something like he didn't know about the age of the Sahara Desert. That's a bad point. He mischaracterized Kent's boat analogy, where if you find a coin in a boat, you know the boat could not have sunk before that coin was created. Kent Hovind pointed out that time, he's made this analogy in other debates, is like a pacifier. A little baby sucks in their pacifier and they scream when you take it out of their mouth. That's why you give them the pacifier, so they aren't screaming. And if you prove that there's not billions of years, people who religiously believe it, they get a little bit agitated. Kent talked about how the human population growth. Destiny claimed it's not linear, but I didn't hear him make a good case for how we can really believe that the population would flatline with people being intelligent and people make babies. That's what our instinct is to do. There are some people that violate that instinct. But in general, the population still tries to make babies and the population grows. Destiny gave Kent the last word. That was polite of him. On that one, Kent didn't have anything more to say on that thread. There was a stupid question asked by one of the people watching the debate. Does a bulldog come from a non-bulldog? That's a bad question because speciation, Kent's belief, does allow for things to change. Not to change into something dramatically different. There are barriers, there are lines that you're not going to cross. But a bulldog is a very specific species or subspecies of dog. And Kent never said that you're not going to have some changes. No. So, Kent's belief about the past, what the Bible says about things bringing forth after their kind, is not disproven by a specific subspecies and breed of one kind of animal having been bred from a wilder version or a less specific breed. A question was asked is, how would you carbon-14 date a freshly killed seal? That's not an intelligent question. You date it. If carbon-14 dating works and is reliable, then you just get the seal to the lab. There shouldn't be a difference. Maybe you should dry it out first. Maybe wetness would get in the way of the process of how you do carbon-14 dating, but maybe you dry it out first, but you get it to the lab. That's all you need to do to carbon date a seal. If carbon-14 is reliable, Kent made the point, it will tell you the seal was freshly killed. If it doesn't say freshly killed, then you've got reason to doubt carbon-14 dates and to take them with a grain of salt or a truckload of metaphorical salt. Yeah, Ken said if anything is living, it has carbon-14 and it should be able to be tested. He made the offer to go to a veterinarian, find a dog that had been euthanized instead of killing a still living dog, cut it into 5 parts and send it to labs and to test carbon-14. I wonder if anyone's done that. If anyone's done that, and there's a link, you could tell me about the news story, where I can look for it, so I can see if somebody ever tested carbon-14 that way. That would be a good way to test it. Destiny claimed that old carbon-14 is building up in the sea, and that's why you can't trust a carbon-14 date of a living seal. Well, then you can't trust any carbon-14 date if there's old carbon-14 building up in the sea or anywhere. So, thank you for watching my review of a Kent Hovind debate hosted by the Modern Day Debates channel, where Kent Hovind metaphorically slaughtered his opponent, who was brave enough to come and debate him. Some people aren't brave enough to debate against Kent Hovind. You have a good day.